Hello guys, welcome for the first time to this World War History course. My name is Miss Nora and I hope you really enjoy learning through our different activities, presentations and videos that you will find in this platform, and that you achieve your learning goals in a meaningful learning. That is the important thing. The important thing about this course. Um, if you have already read the syllabus of this course, you may know that the first stage that we're going to talk about today is called Paths to War. In this stage, the objective is that the student, or yourself, will be able to understand in 100% by the end of the stage the causes that led to the Second World War. And you will do this by focusing on the actions and decisions of the so-called Axis powers, also known as Germany, Italy, and Japan. Okay, first of all, it is essential for you to know about a really important character who participated in the Second World War, and not only participated but also his ideas, his beliefs were like the basis and the beginning of this whole conflict among nations. His name was Adolf Hitler. This guy right here. Maybe you already knew him, maybe you didn't, but the thing is that he is pretty famous because of the whole thing he started. He was really important at that time, and he still is really important. So he is a key character in this whole conflict. Well, Hitler believed that the Germans were a so-called Aryan race that was superior to every other race in the planet. No matter your race or your nationality at that time, the Germans were greater and better than you because they were Germans, just because of that, according to Hitler. And also, because of that belief, he had another one, that Germany was capable of obtaining great power and of building a great civilization, but in order to do so, Germany would need a greater extension, a greater length. And Hitler, by the 1920s, had already expressed his intentions of obtaining this land from the Soviet Union. Let me show you the Soviet Union by the 1920s. We have a map here that shows a part of Europe and a part of Asia. Well, right here is Germany. It's like the size of my fingertip. And the big red thing is the Soviet Union at that time. As you can see, it was really big, and Hitler planned to conquer all that territory for his race, for his country. He also said that his nation, Germany, had to start preparing for a war with the Soviet Union to get this territory. And once he had conquered the Soviet Union, he would have slaves, Slavic people, to resettle all this land, to resettle all this territory for the German people. Imagine, he was talking about having slaves from other races to start again new cities, new civilizations, just for the German people. So, all these Hitler's ideas can be synthesized in one single sentence. That is that Hitler wanted an Aryan racial state that he thought it would dominate Europe for like 100,000 years, and he will call this state the Third Reich. Okay, now let's go back a little bit to the end of World War I with the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles limited Germany's military power. Hitler, as Chancellor of Germany, He introduced himself to the German people and to the world as a man of peace, and he said that he only intended to revise the terms of the Treaty of Versailles in the best peaceful way possible. Because the provisions that this treaty stated were unfair to Germany, according to his opinion. Of course, he thought that Germany had the right to regain its rightful place among the European states. However, he didn't seem to care much about peace when he announced on March 9th of 1935 the creation of a new air force. And also he began a military draft that would expand Germany's army from 100,000 to 550,000 troops. Of course, these actions were clearly violating the Treaty of Versailles terms. As you may have guessed, once other nations knew about this, such as France, Great Britain, and Italy, they warned Germany against future aggressive steps. But they really never didn't do anything serious about it. I mean, they were having their own problems, internal problems that concerned the Great Depression. They were in the middle of the Great Depression, so they really didn't much about the German situation. They just warned Germany. But the fact that these nations didn't do anything serious convinced Hitler that they had no intention to defend the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. That's why on March 7th of 1936, Hitler sent troops into the region of Rhineland. The thing with Rhineland was that, in fact, it was part of the German territory. So technically, he was invading his own territory. But the problem was that Rhineland was actually a demilitarized area, which means that Germany had no right, according to the Treaty of Versailles, to carry out any military activity there. The only ones with power to do anything concerning an army or military forces or troops or whatever, the only ones with the right were the French and the British armies. But France decided not to do anything without the British support, and Great Britain decided not to make a big deal about it, not to make a big deal about the German invasion. They thought that it was a reasonable action that Germany was doing this because they were just angry, they were just dissatisfied with the terms they were in. Therefore, Great Britain began to practice a policy called the appeasement. This policy was based on the belief that reasonable demands of dissatisfied nations such as Germany should be satisfied in order to keep these countries satisfied. It sounds weird, but in other words, the policy stated that the Western countries needed to satisfy the demands of nations such as Germany because because meeting their demands would keep them content and peaceful, and therefore it will also help maintaining the peace and the control along the world. So it was like a win-win. And while Great Britain was busy thinking that the German invasion wasn't really a big deal, Hitler was already making meaningful alliances, like really meaningful with powerful countries such as the one he made with Benito Mussolini. This guy right here, well, he was Benito Mussolini, and he was a fascist Italian dictator. He was really important. He was a really important character in this war too, because he invaded Ethiopia in October of 1935 in order to achieve his goal of creating a Roman Empire in the Mediterranean. But guess what? France and Great Britain opposed to this invasion, so we can say that Mussolini was also angry, like Hitler, at the world too. And that's why he and Hitler began to get closer. So, in 1936, both Germany and Italy decided to help the General Francisco Franco from Spain in the Spanish Civil War. Later, the same year, in October actually, Mussolini and Hitler made an agreement where they recognized their common interest concerning political and economic matter. One month later, that means in November, they spoke of this new alliance to the world, and they called it the Rome-Berlin Axis. That's why Germany and Italy and then Japan are called the Axis powers of this war. Another alliance that Hitler made that same year, but one month later, was the Anti-Comintern Pact with Japan. With this pact, both nations agreed to create a common front against communism. Okay, so Hitler was radical about his ideals, but he was smart enough to make all these alliances and to take really efficient solutions and decisions. Thanks to this, by 1937, Germany was once again a world power. And Hitler was convinced more now than ever that neither France nor Great Britain would oppose to his actions. So in 1938, he decided to pursue the union of Austria with Germany. And in fact, Austria was his native land. You may not be surprised that in order to achieve this union, he used threats against the Austrian Chancellor. Hitler forced the Austrian Chancellor to put Austrian Nazis in charge of the government. And of course, this new government would invite the German troops into the country, into Austria. And this is how, in March 13 of 1938, Hitler annexed Austria to Germany. He achieved this goal, which was a huge step actually. But now, Hitler's next objective was the destruction of Czechoslovakia. On September 15 of 1938, apparently this was a great year for Hitler. He demanded that Sudetenland, which was a Czechoslovakian land territory, well, he demanded this territory for Germany, because Sudetenland was an area in northwestern Czechoslovakia that was mainly inhabited by Germans. So, by the way, he said that he would risk a world war if it was necessary for him to achieve this goal. And apparently he was really literal about it, because in fact he did really provoke a world war. But anyway, there was a conference in Munich, Germany, where British, French, German, and Italian representatives reunited and agreed to meet Hitler's demands. So this meant that the German troops were now allowed to occupy Jutland. And that's right, the people from that part of Czechoslovakia were just abandoned by the Western powers to their own fate. That's pretty much unfair, but that's how it happened. Nevertheless, the Munich conference was the high point of the Western appeasement of Hitler. This means that there would be no more agreements to make Hitler's demands possible. That was it. That was just it. Hitler promised as well not to make any more demands. But, well, we can all imagine that he was not a man who cared much about promises if they represented an obstacle to achieve his goals. In fact, Hitler was convinced more now than ever that the Western democracies would not fight him at all. So in March of 1939, Hitler invaded Bohemia and Moravia, which granted him the control of the whole eastern part of Slovakia. Well, at least this action finally caused a reaction from the Western countries and also convinced them that Hitler's promises were worthless. Great Britain then offered to protect Poland when Hitler began to demand the Polish port of Danzig, and at the same time, France and Great Britain realized that there was only one powerful enough country that could help contain the Nazi aggression, and that was the Soviet Union. Therefore, they began political and military negotiations with Joseph Stalin, which was the Soviet dictator. Even though the Western countries were very powerful, Hitler still didn't fear them. I mean, come on, he still didn't fear them. But what he did fear was the intervention of the Soviet Union. He feared an alliance between the Western countries and the Soviet Union because this would mean a two-front war for Germany. That's why he made his own agreement with Joseph Stalin. On August 23rd of 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, and as its name indicates, the pact was about the two nations promising not to attack each other. Of course, to get this pact, Hitler had to sacrifice some things, offer some things to Joseph Stalin. But when I say sacrifice, offer some things, I'm doing this because he wasn't really sacrificing anything, or he wasn't really offering anything, because, well, he offered Joseph Stalin the control of Eastern Poland and the Baltic states. But the reality is that he didn't really care much about what he had to offer, since he wasn't planning to keep his word. As we just learned, he really didn't care much about promises. So the rest of the world was pretty much shocked when they learned that Hitler made this pact, because Hitler announced the pact on September 1st, and then German forces invaded Poland thanks to this pact. This caused the invasion of Germany to Poland, caused 2 days later that British and French forces declared war to Germany. And that's how it all started. That's how World War II started. and for Germany and for the rest of the world. And as you can see, surprisingly, it all began with one man's ideals, Hitler's ideas and beliefs. But as you will continue to revise the next presentations and the next videos, you will learn more about more other actions that happened and that influenced the World War II. I really hope you liked this video and that you understood in a clear way more about this stage. And we'll see you next time.